Chapter 2. I confess it was disagreeable to me. Though I had made up my mind that I would play, I had not proposed to play for other people. It rather threw me out of my reckoning, and I went into the gambling saloon with very disagreeable feelings. From the first glance I disliked everything in it. I cannot endure the flunkyishness of the newspapers of the whole world, and especially our Russian papers, in which almost every spring the journalists write articles upon two things. First, on the extraordinary magnificence and luxury of the gambling saloons on the Rhine, and secondly, on the heaps of gold which are said to lie on the tables. They are not paid for it. It is simply done from disinterested obsequiousness. There was no sort of magnificence in these trashy rooms, and not only were there no piles of gold lying on the table, but there was hardly any gold at all. No doubt sometime in the course of the season, some eccentric person, either an Englishman or an Asiatic of some sort, a Turk perhaps, as it was that summer, would suddenly turn up and lose or win immense sums. All the others play for paltry guldens, and on an average there is very little money lying on the tables. As soon as I went into the gambling saloon, for the first time in my life, I could not for some time make up my mind to play. There was a crush besides. If I had been alone, even then I believe I should soon have gone away and not have begun playing. I confess my heart was beating and I was not cool. I knew for certain and had made up my mind long before that I should not leave Roulettenberg unchanged, that some radical and fundamental change would take place in my destiny. So it must be, and so it would be. Ridiculous as it may be that I should expect so much for myself from roulette, yet I consider even more ridiculous the conventional opinion accepted by all that it is stupid and absurd to expect anything from gambling. And why should gambling be worse than any other means of making money? For instance, commerce. It is true that only 1 out of 100 wins, but what is that to me? In any case, I determined to look about me first and not to begin anything in earnest that evening. If anything did happen that evening, it would happen by chance and be something slight, and I staked my money accordingly. Besides, I had to study the game, for in spite of the 1,000 descriptions of roulette which I had read so eagerly, I understood absolutely nothing of its working, until I saw it myself. In the first place, it all struck me as so dirty somehow, morally horrid and dirty. I am not speaking at all of the greedy, uneasy faces which by dozens, even by hundreds, crowd round the gambling tables. I see absolutely nothing dirty in the wish to win as quickly and as much as possible. I always thought very stupid the answer of that fat and prosperous moralist who replied to someone's excuse that he played for a very small stake, "So much the worse, it is such petty covetousness." As though covetousness were not exactly the same whether on a big scale or a petty one. It is a matter of proportion. What is paltry to Rothschild is wealth to me, and as for profits and winnings, people, not only at roulette but everywhere, do nothing but try to gain or squeeze something out of one another. Whether profits or gains are nasty is a different question, but I am not solving that question here. Since I was myself possessed by an intense desire of winning, I felt as I went into the hall all this covetousness, and all this covetous filth, if you like, in a sense congenial and convenient. It is most charming when people do not stand on ceremony with one another, but act openly and above board. And indeed, why deceive oneself? Gambling is a most foolish and imprudent pursuit. What was particularly ugly at first sight in all the rabble round the roulette table was the respect they paid to that pursuit, the solemnity and even reverence with which they all crowded round the tables. That is why a sharp distinction is drawn here between the kind of game that is mauvais genre and the kind that is permissible to well-bred people. There are two sorts of gambling, one the gentlemanly sort, the other the plebeian mercenary sort, the game played by all sorts of riff-raff. The distinction is sternly observed here, and how contemptible this distinction really is. A gentleman may stake, for instance, 5 or 10 louis d'or, rarely more. He may, however, stake as much as 1,000 francs if he is very rich, but only for the sake of the play, simply for amusement. That is, simply to look on at the process of winning or of losing, but must on no account display an interest in winning. If he wins, he may laugh aloud, for instance, may make a remark to one of the bystanders. He may even put down another stake, and may even double it, but solely from curiosity, for the sake of watching and calculating the chances, and not from the plebeian desire to win. In fact, he must look on all gambling, roulette, trente et quarante, as nothing else than a pastime got up entirely for his amusement. He must not even suspect the greed for gain and the shifty dodges on which the bank depends. It would be extremely good form, too, if he should imagine that all the other gamblers, all the rabble trembling over a golden, were rich men and gentlemen like himself, and were playing simply for their diversion and amusement. This complete ignorance of reality and innocent view of people would be, of course, extremely aristocratic. I have seen many mammas push forward their daughters, innocent and elegant misses of 15 and 16, and, giving them some gold coins, teach them how to play. The young lady wins or loses, invariably smiles and walks away, very well satisfied. Our general went up to the table with solid dignity. A flunkey rushed to hand him a chair, but he ignored the flunkey. He very slowly and deliberately took out his purse, very slowly and deliberately took 300 francs in gold from his purse, staked them on the black, and won. He did not pick up his winnings, but left them on the table. Black turned up again. He didn't pick up his winnings that time either. And when, the third time, red turned up, he lost at once 1,200 francs. He walked away with a smile and kept up his dignity. I am positive he was raging inwardly, and if the stake had been 2 or 3 times as much, he would not have kept up his dignity, but would have betrayed his feelings. A Frenchman did, however, before my eyes, win and lose as much as 30,000 francs with perfect gaiety and no sign of emotion. A real gentleman should not show excitement even if he loses his whole fortune. Money ought to be so much below his gentlemanly dignity as to be scarcely worth noticing. Of course, it would have been extremely aristocratic not to notice the sordidness of all the rabble and all the surroundings. Sometimes, however, the opposite pose is no less aristocratic. To notice, that is, to look about one, even perhaps to stare through a lorgnette at the rabble, though always taking the rabble and the sordidness as nothing else but a diversion of a sort, as though it were a performance got up for the amusement of gentlemen. One may be jostled in that crowd, but one must look about one with complete conviction that one is oneself a spectator, and that one is in no sense part of it. Though again to look very attentively is not quite the thing. That again would not be gentlemanly, because in any case the spectacle does not deserve much or close attention. And in fact, few spectacles do deserve a gentleman's close attention. and yet it seemed to me that all this was deserving of very close attention, especially for one who had come not only to observe it, but sincerely and genuinely reckoned himself as one of the rabble. As for my hidden moral convictions, there is no place for them, of course, in my present reasonings. Let that be enough for the present. I speak to relieve my conscience. But I notice one thing, that of late it has become horribly repugnant to me to test my thoughts and actions by any moral standard whatever. I was guided by something different. The rabble certainly did play very sordidly. I am ready to believe, indeed, that a great deal of the most ordinary thieving goes on at the gaming table. The croupiers who sit at each end of the table look at the stakes and reckon the winnings. They have a great deal to do. They are rabble too. For the most part they are French. However, I was watching and observing not with the object of describing roulette. I kept a sharp lookout for my own sake, so that I might know how to behave in the future. I noticed, for instance, that nothing was more common than for someone to stretch out his hand and snatch what one had won. A dispute would begin, often an uproar, and a nice job one would have to find witnesses and to prove that it was one's stake. At first it was all an inexplicable puzzle to me. All I could guess and distinguish was that the stakes were on the numbers, on odd and even, and on the colors. I made up my mind to risk 100 guldens of Polina Alexandrovna's money. The thought that I was not playing for myself seemed to throw me out of my reckoning. It was an extremely unpleasant feeling, and I wanted to be rid of it as soon as possible. I kept feeling that by beginning for Polina I should break my own luck. Is it impossible to approach the gambling table without becoming infected with superstition? I began by taking out 5 Friedrichsdor, 50 gulden, and putting them on the even. The wheel went round and 13 turned up. I had lost. With a sickly feeling I staked another 5 Friedrichsdor on red, simply in order to settle the matter and go away. Red turned up. I staked all the 10 Friedrichsdor. Red turned up again. I staked all the money again on the same, and again red turned up. On receiving 40 Friedrichsdor, I staked 20 upon the 12 middle figures, not knowing what would come of it. I was paid 3 times my stake. In this way, from 10 Friedrichsdor, I had all at once 80. I was overcome by a strange, unusual feeling which was so unbearable that I made up my mind to go away. It seemed to me that I should not have been playing at all like that if I had been playing for myself. I staked the whole 80 Friedrichsdor, however, on even. This time 4 turned up. Another 80 Friedrichsdor was poured out to me, and gathering up the whole heap of 160 Friedrichsdor, I set off to find Polina Alexandrovna. They were all walking somewhere in the park, and I only succeeded in seeing her after supper. This time the Frenchman was not of the party, and the general unbosomed himself. Among other things, he thought fit to observe to me that he would not wish to see me at the gambling tables. It seemed to him that it would compromise him if I were to lose too much. "But even if you were to win a very large sum, I should be compromised too," he added significantly. "Of course I have no right to dictate your actions, but you must admit yourself—" At this point he broke off, as his habit was. I answered dryly that I had very little money, and so I could not lose very conspicuously even if I did play. Going upstairs to my room, I succeeded in handing Polina her winnings, and told her that I would not play for her another time. "Why not?" she asked in a tremor. "Because I want to play on my own account," I answered, looking at her with surprise. "And it hinders me." "Then you will continue in your conviction that roulette is your only escape and salvation?" she asked ironically. I answered very earnestly that I did. That as for my confidence that I should win, it might be absurd. I was ready to admit it, but that I wanted to be let alone. Polina Alexandrovna began insisting I should go halves with her in today's winnings, and was giving me 80 Friedrich's d'Or, suggesting that I should go on playing on those terms. I refused the half, positively and finally, and told her that I could not play for other people, not because I didn't want to, but because I should certainly lose. "Yet I, too," she said, pondering, "stupid as it seems, am building all my hopes on roulette. And so you must go on playing, sharing with me, and, of course, you will." At this point she walked away, without listening to further objections. Breaking in. Just to gain a sense of perspective, we know that Polina's diamonds were pawned for 700 guldens, and that a Friedrich d'Or is worth 10 guldens. The narrator stakes a total of 10 Friedrichs d'Or in the chapter, leaving 600 guldens untouched. So, when our narrator returns with 160 Friedrichs d'Or, plus what he never staked, he more than triples her money. End of comments.